Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. We're your wellness check-in team. We talk about different categories of wellness and seeking balance between them. There's overview info on our website, letsbewelltogether.com.
This is episode 43.
We hope our territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people within a reconciliation process. We're on the Haldeman Tract, located on the traditional territories of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land.
And welcome back to Let's Be Well Together. And today you have Sheila and Sammy. Hi, Sammy. How are you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm excellent. Very good. Today we are going to be doing facet activities.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And facet activities are things that foster areas of wellness.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So today we will be working on our intellectual, or talking about intellectual wellness, exercising the mind. There's lots of things that can work your mind, and one of them is games.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I wanted to do this facet because I love games.
Yeah, me too. I love them so much.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So some of the games that I like to play are, of course, euchre.
Yeah.
The euchre is a big one because in our family, we play euchre. We even do euchre tournaments. And
You
like
have to know euchre to be in the family.
Yeah. It's like an initiation into our family. And for anyone who knows, we have a large family, so it can be intimidating playing euchre.
Definitely, especially when grandma is playing.
Yes, especially when grandma's playing. And just a funny backstory, Elise was playing euchre this weekend against our family. It was a little get-together, and she beat grandma. And then Dawn came in and was like, oh, well, you're not getting away with that. So Dawn and Beaver came in, and she beat them too.
Wow.
Yep.
Good job, Elise. Yeah, that's
so bravo.
big. That's a lot. Yeah.
But euchre is great just because it does, there's a little bit of mind in there, but there's also luck as well. So it's really great because it's also a social activity.
Yeah.
Right? Because you have to talk and socialize with people. And I mean, there's lots of games that you can play online, or you can play computer games, but playing games is also social as well as intellectual.
Yeah, and me and David, we have a lot of game nights with our friends, and it's just a reason to kind of get everybody together and play one or two games and talk and have fun, have a couple drinks, and it's one of our favorite ways to like hang out with people now.
Okay, so what are some of your favorite games?
Yeah, I have a lot. I have a lot of like favorite games.
Yeah.
But one that we like to play a lot as our friend group is called Secret Hitler.
Okay.
And it's a really cool game. It's like trying to figure out like who's the murderer.
Right.
Who murder wink, like that kind of idea.
Yes. A little bit more intense.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's like there's one Hitler, two fascists, and however many liberals.
Okay.
And nobody knows who's who.
Okay.
So you're all just trying to figure out who's Hitler, and you want to take him down, and liberals want to win, but the fascists are kind of working on the other side, trying to make you believe that they are liberal, but on the other side, they're trying to like mess you up and make you do things that are going to affect your game.
Okay. And what does Hitler do?
Hitler, it depends. So it depends on how many people are playing the game.
Okay.
Sometimes Hitler doesn't know anything.
Oh.
And they're just trying to figure out like who the two fascists are and who the liberals are. And you're just kind of like trying to make sure that nobody figures you out.
Right.
Because if the liberals guess who Hitler is, then they lose right away.
Okay.
Sorry, like the fascists, like that
the fascists lose right away.
They lose right away.
Okay, got you.
But there's other versions where there's a smaller group, and then like Hitler and one fascist, they would like know who each other is.
Okay.
Because there's this little like recording at the beginning, and it tells you like, if you're fascist, open your eyes, and then if somebody else is opening their eyes, that is your partner,
right?
And then it's like, then slither back into your cave. It's Will Wheaton, he narrates it.
That's great.
So it's really funny. It's a really fun game, and it gets people going for sure. Sometimes it causes fights within.
Oh, really?
Yeah, not like real fights, but like definitely
arguments,
and especially when like your partner is also playing because you're like, how could you not believe me that I was liberal?
Oh, yes. And that often happens with partners, right? Like you're like, you know each other a little too well. Yeah. That is great. Yeah. Okay. A game that I really love to play is called The Game. Mm-hmm. Now, most of you probably don't know this game, but and it's literally called The Game, and it's a card game you can buy. So I love the fact that you can just carry it with you, like in your pocket, in your purse.
Yeah.
You need at least 4 people. I think you can play it with 6 as well. It's a cooperative game. So I really love that because you all win or you all lose together. So you really communicate well together and you have to work together. And so I love The Game. It is definitely my favorite.
Yeah, I've never played that one, but it sounds really cool. And it's nice that it's pretty simple and that everybody can kind of learn it.
Yeah, because like there's two different piles. There's 2 ones and there's 2 hundreds, and you basically your cards are all numbered, and you are going either up from 1 to 100 or going down from 100 to 1.
Right.
And your goal is just to get rid of all your cards.
Yeah,
and
as a team.
Yeah, so it's really fun. So cooperative games, there's quite a few of them. And so they're a lot of fun.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that game reminds me of another smaller card game. It's called Love Letter.
Oh.
And it's pretty cool too. And it's not a cooperative game, but it's like pretty simple and everybody can pretty much pick it up. And basically you want to have the highest card at the end. And there's different cards that like, there's princess and knight and handmaid and all these different things that like you have a little directional card that says what each one does. So if you have a handmaid and you play it, that means that you're immune for a round. Okay. So nobody can try to get you out or guess what card you have or challenge you. Because if they challenge you and they have a higher card, you like secretly show them. And if you have the higher card, then they get out. Oh. So if you're immune, then you kind of are good for that round. And your goal is to make it to the end and hopefully have like an 8 or a 9, which is like a princess or a count or something like that. Yeah. So
it sounds really interesting. Not a nice simple one. Yeah. Well, Sammy's actually a pro because she actually took a course.
Yes, I did.
on board games?
On board games,
that is so interesting. It like a university course?
Yeah, I was at University of Waterloo. Wow. Me and my friend, like every term there'd be, you'd have an elective where you're kind of like, oh, I can kind of take whatever I want.
Yeah.
And we saw this new one and it was board games. And it was very, very interesting. And I loved it because I'm obsessed with games.
Right.
At first, it was kind of like looking at different games and understanding like different rules, like cooperative games versus strategy versus chance. And then you got to make your own games.
I was wondering, Oh, that is so cool. Yeah,
and I did get 100% in the course. So I made some pretty good games.
And that really ups your...
Definitely.
Your average. So good for you, Sammy.
Yeah. So we made like is one of my best friends. We made like a Disney card game and it was the first one had to be cards. The second one had to be a chance game. And then the third one, you had to take a known story and turn it into a board game.
Oh, cool.
So we took Around the World in 80 Days and we made this full
board game.
I got it like laminated at Staples and it was kind of like a travel around the world. And as you go around the world, you do like different tasks and every continent.
It's like a board game of The Amazing Race.
Exactly. That's like 100% what it was. Yeah. So it was so much fun. I had a great time and our prof was so funny and he was great. And he really made me love it even more.
Oh, that's great. Because I wasn't sure, like when you take a course like that, I can imagine some really intense people who play board games, you know?
Definitely.
And competitive and really,
Yeah. I really had no idea what I was walking into. I was like, oh, board games. Okay, sure. But there were some people like that when they would always talk about like the strategic games. But then by the end, some of those people, when you overthink like creating this game, it makes it too complicated. Right. So people don't really understand. Versus I am kind of a simple person sometimes. So I made a simple game that kind of everybody could understand and understood how to win. And
because man, there's some games that are so complicated. Like we've played some of those too. Because my daughter Elise and her husband are game connoisseurs. So they have like they collect games, and so some every time we go over there, they like to introduce a new game.
Oh, fun!
Sometimes they're so complicated. I'm just like, my mind is. So when you're first playing it, you just don't get it. You're like playing it, but not quite. Playing it, and then you're like, okay. Let's do it again. Now I get it, you know, and then, you get a little bit more and and a little bit more. And it's, of course, it's working your intellectual. Definitely. So this is good.
For sure.
Working that mind. So
something me and David play a lot is also Harry Potter Trivial Pursuit.
Oh, yeah.
And we're the only ones who play. together because nobody wants to play with us because we know it all.
Oh, well, we know what? We'll have a games night and we will play. Okay. Because John's pretty good at Harry Potter and I'm not too bad either.
Yeah, and it's nice to play those ones in like teams because it's like you can kind of work on with each other. Because sometimes like David will remember the most random facts. It's like, what color was this teacher's eyes? And I'm like, what? Like, how do you remember that?
Well, the good thing is there's pretty much four,
only
maybe. Three, like, your odds
Definitely.
are pretty good.
Yeah.
So let's think of a few more other games. Have you ever played chess? Or
I've played a little bit of chess. I started playing just because of the Queen's Gambit.
I loved it. I loved it.
Good.
See, I'm intimidated by chess, and John is very good at it, so I won't play against him.
Yeah.
But when I watched that show, I didn't even want to watch the show because I didn't know enough about chess.
That's
I didn't
how I felt
think.
too. Yeah.
But it was so good.
Yeah, and you didn't really need to know anything about chess.
You didn't need to know, but I felt like I did learn.
Yeah,
you know?
definitely. I know.
And I wanted to play. So
yeah, I think after that show, a lot of people got chessboards for Christmas.
Yeah. So, maybe I'll start playing a little chess. I think I'll start playing just on the computer, the easy, and then work my way up just to learn a little.
Yeah.
But that might be a nice challenge for me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So any other games or?
Yeah, I do love a good chance game, and not everybody loves it, and because you can't really control the situation always. But one of my favorite chance games is Yahtzee.
Yahtzee. I just love saying that word.
Too, yeah.
I mean, that game can frustrate me.
Yeah.
Because you only need 3 things and you can't get any of them. You know, and
definitely.
It's just like it can be a little frustrating, but it is.
Yeah.
Wow, so exhilarating.
Yeah, when you get that Yahtzee. Yeah, for sure.
When you get that Yahtzee.
Yeah.
And one more that I would like to mention is Codenames.
Yeah, so much fun.
Oh my gosh, Codenames is so much fun, especially in a group. Really great social, and it really does work your mind because you have to try and put these words together to give clues and, it doesn't work. Or if you're guessing the clues, you gotta go outside the box.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
It is a lot of fun.
Yeah, and trying to connect all of these simple words with one clue so that your team can get all of them right in one round.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's so difficult. Like it's tough.
difficult.
So the words are simple when you look at them, but trying to connect them and find one word to explain them to your team. Yeah. It definitely works your mind.
So this is a really fun, faceted activity to do, guys. Work your intellectual, work your mind, and work your social. So go out and play a game.
Definitely.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Today's interview is a bit different. It's not in any specific category of wellness. And secondly, I'm not going to do the normal bio where I tell you about the guest and what they do. I'm talking to my friend and family member, Al Tordjman. Hey, Al.
Hey, John. How's it going?
It's going great. So I was talking to Al about my different theories about wellness, and in particular, the concept where you develop the categories of wellness and then the activities that foster them and then a wellness check-in. And he said it reminded him of a book that he read and some concepts that were put forward. And who is that from, Al?
This individual is Steven Covey. He's written quite a few books, mostly about your value system and how to use one's time effectively. Okay,
and what I loved about it is, so I'm a to-do list person. So when I go through my wellness check-in and I do the areas and whatnot, I have a certain approach. And it's just kind of my personality. I like to write things down. I like to have my bullet points. I like to see what I'm missing. I like to see what I'm getting. But when I was putting my book together, Sheila read the manuscript as I was developing it. And she goes, John, I'm not a to-do list person. And I realized almost immediately that you have to have something that's flexible, that works for a whole bunch of different people, and that different people are free to use their own best way forward. And I actually invited people to let me know if you don't want to use a to-do list approach, what are some other ideas? And this thing you came up with, Al, you were talking about 4 quadrants. I think it fits somewhere in this whole system, and we can figure out how at some point. But first of all, can you just tell me generally what are the 4 quadrants and how does it work in terms of time management?
Certainly. I'd like to first just give some credit to Steven Covey, who came out with this quadrant system, which I read many years ago, and it's really stuck with me, and it's a great alternative to just creating a list. And basically, the quadrants, if you can visualize this, include things that you do with your time that are not important or important. And are they urgent or not urgent?
Right. So what I'm envisaging then is a large square and within it 4 squares. One axis is important. The other axis is urgent, right?
Right.
So you'd end up with something like important and urgent, not important and urgent. What are the 4 quadrants?
Right. So, yeah, that's basically correct. If you just try to visualize this axis of things that are not important and important, or are they urgent and not urgent? So then you end up with, all right, so I've got a box here of things that are important and urgent, or important and not urgent. We could perhaps start with those two.
Okay, well, so let's start. Well, let me talk at a high level first.
Mm-hmm.
If I understand right, because we were just chatting about this, the problem is a lot of us spend a lot of our time on urgent, not important, right?
Urgent, not important, or it depends on the kind of individual you are. You might be spending a lot of your time on not urgent, not important events.
Right, I guess that's a great point.
Right.
Okay, well then, in that context, I think you're right. What quadrant would you like to talk about first?
Let's start with probably the easiest to understand, which is the important and urgent activities that you have to face.
Okay, so can you think of any real life examples?
Sure. So let's picture you're in the type of job where you have some deadlines to reach.
Okay.
And you really have to meet those deadlines. Well, you could consider that an important and urgent activity which you need to spend your time on. Another might be that you go to the doctors and you get your blood work done and you're told, oh goodness, you're going to have to pay attention to your cholesterol level and I really need you to do the following things in order to deal with it. I would consider that an important, urgent thing that you need to address.
Okay. And then what would the next quadrant be?
So let's look at things that are not important and yet still urgent. So these might be interruptions, emails, calls, meetings, those kinds of things. You still have to deal with them, but if you can kind of delegate those things because you realize they're not truly important, that would be your best approach with that.
It's hard though, because I think the fact that it's urgent, like I hear what you're saying and I really love this way of breaking things down, but it's also clarifying to me that like I think urgent can feel important. Just the mere fact that something's urgent sometimes makes me think it's important, and I don't take that minute to sit back and say, is this important?
This is a really good point, and that's the part of reflecting that you need to do on that is you go, all right, this appears to be an urgent situation. How truly important is this in relation to everything else I need to do with my time? And you might start to discover, well, this really isn't all that important. I only need to spend maybe 20 minutes on this. I don't need to remunerate about it, and I don't need to plan deeply for it.
What I love about this too is one of the messages, I'm not sure if you've heard the podcast, but one of the messages we try and send out often is so much of this is about self-awareness. Mm-hmm. Like it's just so important to try and be self-aware. And these are amazing questions to ask. You know, something hits you, you start to do it immediately, but you never actually stop and think, is this the right thing to do right now? Is this, you know, in a wellness check-in, for example, context, is this what I need to focus on? It may feel urgent, but is it important?
This is exactly it. And it's all about just really reflecting on how much time do I need to spend on this particular activity to achieve what I need to achieve in relation to the bigger picture of what's happening in your life.
Right. So what's another quadrant then?
So another quadrant would be the not important and not urgent. So
Okay.
let's think about this.
That doesn't sound like something I spend a lot of time on, but what is it? Like, what are some examples?
Well, I got to admit, sometimes it is fun to spend time in this
True.
quadrant.
True, I can
You know,
imagine.
you want to unwind. It's like, geez, I've been dealing with things that seem important and urgent, but really, I just want to kill some time and lay back.
Okay, but I'm going to suggest that falls into the important, not urgent category. But anyway, we can argue about that another
Right.
time. But can you think of some other things too that would be unimportant and not urgent?
Oh, there's a host of items that can take up your time of not important, not urgent. Let's think about it. Oh, let's do some busy work.
Right.
I want to clean up my closet, and I'd like to organize all of my clothes by color hues and,
Right.
Going from the darkest to the lightest. I mean, let's face it, we can find so many things that are basically time wasters.
Yeah,
right?
like I would actually say there that probably cleaning up your closet is probably important, but color hues, maybe not so much.
Right.
But I get your point. Like, actually, if we think back, like whatever the examples might be, there are things we spend a lot of time on that are both unimportant and not urgent.
Certainly. Why don't you take a look at your smartphone? There's
Right.
a section where you can go under your smartphone and see, how many hours did I spend on my smartphone today? I had an argument with my wife, and I said to her, I think you're spending probably 2.5 hours a day on your smartphone. She completely denied it. And we went on that particular section where you can find out how much time you're spending, and it was actually closer to 3 hours.
Ugh.
And so
And I'm probably worse than that.
yeah, so you got to ask yourself, how much of that time did I consider really important or urgent? It's probably a not important, not urgent activity. How much time do you spend watching TV? Let's face it, we all love our favorite
Yes.
shows. But if you're spending 4 hours a day doing that, is that the quadrant you want to be in for 4 hours of your day?
Okay, well, I'm going to have to move you off this quadrant because it's hitting too close to home, and it's also true. So what's the last quadrant?
All right, I decided to leave the last one as what I consider probably the one that can be life-changing for people. And it would be the important yet not urgent quadrant. So in this quadrant, we would be looking at activities that take some time to develop. It takes some level of planning, such as relationship building, finding new opportunities in life, personal growth, recreation. And I'd have to say that this quadrant best represents your particular podcast.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I love that too, that part of what we're trying to say is you have to put up building blocks. Okay, so I see my approach to wellness as building block. If you know your categories and your activities and you can do a check-in, that's something that you've taken time to learn about yourself through self-awareness and develop in yourself. You're doing this at a time, and I think I told you before we started, it reminds me of that quote by John Kennedy, the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining, right? So when you have the time, you can do these important activities to set up these building blocks, and you're right. It's not urgent because you have to deal with, if the doctor said you have to get this test, or if at work you have to get this done by a particular time, certainly you have to do those important and urgent things.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with doing unimportant, unurgent things for a time during the day. But find the time to do these important things that aren't urgent, that can set you up for a better frame of mind, for success at other times.
That's exactly it. And I would even take that a step further and say, instead of finding the time, when you start to think about your entire day and where you fall in the various quadrants, think of it as, I can manipulate how much time I spend in a given quadrant, particularly if it's not important and yet appears to be urgent, and start to devote some of that time to the important, not urgent quadrant of doing some planning that's really going to change my life.
No, and I love that. Again, it's a matter of starting to make informed choices and choosing, instead of letting life happen to you, making your life happen. Making the most of the moments that you have. And so as I understand this, and we've talked now about the quadrants, so now I want to talk more generally about how I should be thinking about them. This is a tool that helps me understand how much time I should be putting in each of these quadrants during the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not a matter of saying, never do one category, never do another. It's saying, hey, think about it, become self-aware of where you're spending a lot of time. And do you really want to be spending 4 or 5 hours a day on unimportant and unurgent things?
This is precisely it. And it's interesting because that particular quadrant of not important yet urgent can trick people into thinking, oh, this is an important and urgent activity. I really have to deal with it. So just step back for a minute when things appear to be urgent and ask yourself, how important is this really? If I'm able to spend less time on this particular activity, will it really make a big difference in the grand scheme of things? This idea of the quadrants is to help you step back and reflect a little bit of asking yourself, how important is this particular activity in the grand scheme of things? Will this contribute to changing my life for the better?
Okay, and then I guess I can't help but ask, because I'm still grappling with the best approach to, the practical approach for the wellness check-in. Is it a to-do list approach that I use? Other people do it more intuitively. You said you read this about, 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. How do you actually make this work in your life? Is it a matter of kind of reflection before you fall asleep? Do you write something down? How have you been using it in a way that helps?
Well, I sort of try to break down my day, and I look at it almost in quarters. I look at the morning time, and I ask myself, oh, here are the activities I'm going to take on today. And I kind of just intuitively ask myself, how much time am I really going to want to spend on this? And is it going to give me the kind of value that I expect to have more in the long term? And you got to remember that spending time building relationships, long-term planning, personal growth, those are things that build up over time, and they appear that those are the things that sometimes we tend to leave for later activities, but they're greatly important to give them some attention.
And is it fair to say, I think what I'm hearing you saying is, because this is kind of instilled in you, because this is something you read a long time ago and that you gravitate towards, it kind of just kicks in intuitively as you plan your day. But it's definitely there. It's definitely something that's in the back of your mind. Or do you actually have a grid that you on your computer or on your piece of paper?
I don't have a grid that I use, but it does help sometimes if you're feeling you're being a little bit obsessive compulsive about certain activities. You can spend an awful long time just going away and just killing time on them. And it really gives you a different perspective of what am I doing and which quadrant am I in right now. Okay,
so it's kind of intuitive most of the time, but every once in a while when you feel like it's worth it, you actually stop and think about quadrants and where things fit and what you should be devoting your time to?
Absolutely. And usually I do that when I think about my week. I think, how much time did I spend, spending time with my wife? Did we go out on our date this week? Was I in my important, not urgent category? Did I get enough, exercise in this week? What am I doing for personal growth? Because really, I'm really aiming to gravitate towards the important, not urgent quadrant. Obviously, the other ones are a little bit clearer to see. It's this one of the important, not urgent, that takes time to build and is less likely that you're going to think it's worth spending time in when in fact it's probably the most important quadrant.
Well, that's amazing and fascinating. So thanks for that. So we're getting toward the end, and our podcast, this is perfect actually, and it'll be interesting to see how you answer this. Given your quadrants, we talk about different categories of wellness, and each of us may have our own. I have 8 that I've identified as important to me, but we're living in a busy life. And even for someone who's retired, there's not enough time in the day to do everything we want in all the areas of wellness. So we ask every guest the same question, which is kind of like a mini wellness check-in, which is, can you think right now of one area of wellness that's important to you that maybe is languishing right now? And can you think of even one activity you could do to foster wellness in that area?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say for me, I need to spend a little bit more time in relationship building. I've been preoccupied with starting up a home-based business. I've been focusing an awful lot of time on restructuring my finances. And these are all great long-term planning in the not urgent important category. But within that one category, there's also relationship building, which I need to spend a little bit more time on in order to feel more balanced in my life.
Yeah, and for us, I throw that into my category of social wellness. A really important one, and one that can bring a lot of joy and support to our lives. So thanks for that. And thanks for these insights. I just think it's fascinating, and it's one of these things where I've learned something. I'm doing a podcast to try and get a message out about things that are helpful to me, and here I'm hearing from all kinds of guests on things that help me even within that framework. So thanks.
That's great. Thank you.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of the Adventures of the Starving Artist. Unfortunately, I'm still having some microphone difficulties, so thanks for bearing with me on my subpar setup. I appreciate it. This week has been an interesting one. In the field of music, at least at the stage I'm at, it can sometimes, more often than not, if I'm honest, feel like not many people really listen to what you do. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but sometimes it can be a little bit demoralizing when it feels like you work really hard to put something out into the world and maybe 6 people listen to it. Now, don't get me wrong. Even if only, say, 6 people listen to something that I make, if it has an impact on just one of those people, that's really cool. I'm all about that. But sometimes, especially if you're writing with other folks or for other folks, it can feel like you're just kind of not spinning your wheels, but putting a lot more in than you get out. You know what I mean? And if that carries on day after day, it can start to wear at you a little bit. And that was happening to me this week. But some really cool stuff turned that around. For some reason, I don't know what it is, maybe it's the weather, which has been nuts, by the way. But for some reason, people have been coming out of the woodwork this week and just telling me they either heard something that I had done or they re-listened to something that I had helped write or produce or whatever. And just all of a sudden I'm getting feedback from people that I haven't heard from in a long time or that I never thought would even bother to listen to something that I made. It's been kind of cool. So a couple of the highlights. One of my songs that I put out, the one I put out most recently for me, which is called It's All the Same. I didn't really market it super hard, so it's no surprise that it didn't explode. And I'm just, an independent one-man job on that stuff, so no surprises that it didn't blow up or anything. But I had a couple of people tell me, one in text and one in person this past week, like, hey, I listened to your song, and I really liked it. Well, thanks. That's awesome. That put a pep in my step. And then the other one was my friend Kevin. And now Kevin owns the Ford dealership, Cambridge Ford. You might remember that a couple of my buddies and I did the jingle for Cambridge Ford. And so yesterday I got a text from him in the evening, just out of nowhere, out of the blue. And it said, "Here it is in the wild, buddy." And then a voice clip. And it was an ad that Cambridge Ford is running with the jingle in it. And it was really cool. It's kind of cool to hear. I'm never going to get used to that, to hearing my own work out in the world, in the wild, as he said. Pretty cool. Put a pep in my step. That's all I got for you today. Just a little feedback from people out in the world, appreciating stuff that I've done, and that feels good. It's nice to have a bit of an impact. Thank you so much for listening and for putting up with my subpar microphone. I really do appreciate it. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We love our listeners and thanks for joining us. Please help spread the word about Let's Be Well Together podcast. Follow us and rate us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at lets.be.well.together and let your friends know about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do.
It's John and Sheila on Move That Body today.
Hi, everyone.
And I think most people know that we often do our segments, we tape them, and then Might come out right away, but it might come out in a couple of weeks, might come out a few months. So this time we're back talking about our trip to London, England, which was at the end of September, early October 2022. And we did notice a couple things that we wanted to talk about on Move That Body. And the first one was that it was great. There was a lot of places where you could pick up healthy food if you wanted a quick lunch or something.
Yeah, it was something I wasn't expecting because I knew there'd be lots of pubs, lots of fried food, and I was a little worried about that. And we did have our own kitchen, so we could cook things. But if we were on the move, we could go to these takeaway places, restaurants, or even the corner stores. There were some really nice places that already had pre-made things that were very healthy.
Yeah, I'm more focused on that, like the little store type places as opposed to restaurants.
Yeah.
So as an example, we were going to catch a train to go to an event, and we had about 10 minutes before we had to get to the platform. So we thought, well, let's just try and find something quick. And we went out, and there was one of these stores that had a whole bunch of stuff that was pre-made. And you'd see this in Ontario too, but in Canada too, but it would be things like sandwiches and wraps and stuff. But I loved what was in the wrap. So for example, I got one that was just delicious with an avocado, corn, beans, kind of a Mexican type flavor food. And it was so good, and it was really healthy. So
good. And mine was a chicken, and it also was so good. And I can't remember everything it had in it, but it tasted really healthy. And then we noticed a lot of times when we were out and about, yeah, sure, you can go to McDonald's, you can get takeaway Indian or takeaway Chinese. That's kind of the normal stuff. But, right. But you could almost always find things like vegetables or fruit. Sorry, not vegetables, more fruits or really healthy styled sandwiches and wraps. Yeah. Yeah. So we ate pretty well on our holiday. So that was really great. And the other thing too, I remember one night we were staying at an Airbnb, and downstairs, a couple doors down, there was an Indian restaurant, and it looked like a nice one. It did. I'm not going to say like super high end, but it wasn't also super low end. It was somewhere in the middle. Yeah. Maybe a little verging on a little higher. Okay. And we looked at the menu, and of course, we didn't really know anything what to order because we're not very familiar with Indian food. No, and when I was in India, Elise ordered everything, like, because she was more familiar with it. So John was like, "Hey, Sheila, what should we order?" And I was like, "I don't know." I definitely love Indian food when people bring it or when we go places, but we usually need help, and I've never really kind of memorized what to get. What everything is, yeah. The reason I mentioned this restaurant, though, is because in the kind of thinking about healthy food and healthy eating, we did look over the menu, and we were going to ask the waiter for help. Well, too. I think we did ask the waiter for help, and he was like, "Oh, they're all good." Yeah, he didn't really. It wasn't very helpful, right? But not that we thought he was great. It just wasn't very helpful. But anyway, so we decided between the two of us we'd order a couple things, and the one I want to talk about was something I'd never heard of, and I'm going to mispronounce it. It's called shashlik, SHASHLICK. And it turned out it was so good. It was basically, I think, amazing. If you can imagine, kind of making a brochette on the barbecue where there'd be a big piece of onion, a big piece of green pepper, and chicken chunks. I'm not sure how they cooked it. Maybe it was a brochette. But it was just, the spices were so good. And then you have that pop of fresh flavor with the green pepper and the onions and the other vegetables. And it came out sizzling. Right. It was like, I love that. Yeah. So I guess kind of it's a short story, Move That Body, which is just, it's really nice if you have options, especially if you're in another place or if you don't have time. It's so great if you could just be walking around and there's all over the place. There's really healthy food options in front of you, which it was awesome. I don't think we really find as much here. We could look for it, but it's just not as many of the regular stores that have it. I agree. Yeah. There's a thought popped up while running. Even for somebody who thinks about doing the right thing, approaching things in the right way, it doesn't mean that you're going to be successful all the time. So I'm going to give you an example of something that I'm stuck on and I can't get past. It's the stupidest thing, but for whatever reason, it bothers me and it keeps coming back to me. It was a while ago, actually. It was getting to be the start of summer. My body just doesn't react well when I'm running in the heat. I was out for a run and I was coming back. I was still about 2 kilometers from home after running 10 kilometers. And it was also when I was starting my marathon training in a way. I was just getting my distances longer. So I'm not going to say that, 10 or 12 kilometers is long for me, but it was a longish type run. But what really hurt was the heat. I can see a light is just about to turn red.
I'm running up the street. So if I was going to go straight, that light would be red. So and I knew I had to cross the street to get to the other side anyway. So it's perfect time to, as soon as the light turns green, to go left. And as I pulled up to the corner, the configuration of the road was a bit of an angle. So technically I should have kept walking up another 3-4 feet to get to the crosswalk. I had to go up, and then the road kind of goes back a bit to the left, bit of an angle. So I would be backtracking just a tad, really no big deal. But that's where the actual crosswalk lane markers were. But I was really tired. I wasn't thinking, and I'm really tired, and I just decided to wait for a second and cross the road. And there was no cars coming beside me to approach the same red light. Anyway, the light turns green. I start walking in a bit of a daze across the street, and I noticed that there was a car approaching red light, but the light had just turned red, so there's like no rush. He had all the time in the world, but he started to come really close to me. So like I kind of put my hand out a bit. I was a bit shocked because I'd been in the daze. I'm like, what the heck? Anyways, I go by his car. He opens his window and yells, "You should be walking in the crosswalk lines. Watch the lines." And I don't know why, I just blew up and started yelling at the guy. I won't say what I said, but a little bit rude. We both stood there staring at each other, giving each other the evil eye while we waited for the light to turn green. But I was just so mad at the guy. Like, he obviously did that on purpose as some kind of like technical approach. Oh, I'm going to teach this stupid guy who's walking that he should walk in the crosswalk lanes. It ruined my run. I spent the last 2 kilometers thinking of all the stuff I wish I'd said to him. I was angry. Why do people act like that? Why do people sometimes treat runners like shit? Like, don't they realize how tired we can be out there? It's really not a big deal. You didn't have to be so technical. And I mean, here I go. This happened months ago. I'm still stuck on it. And now the problem is every time I get to that corner, it pops into my head. And even though I'm trying not to think about it, I can't stop thinking about it. It's so stupid. So I don't have an answer here. I'm just saying that even those of us with the best intentions, we still have problems living in the moment. We still have problems forgetting about the past. We still have problems getting past stuff. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin. So, John, I was listening to the flip side. I was listening to our podcast. And after a few episodes, I noticed that you have a disclaimer right after the flip side. And I know that you've organized all of these categories and everything. And I just found it interesting that you put the disclaimer after flip side. And I was wondering if that has anything to do with me.
Hang on. I'm distracted because I realized that when we came downstairs, you brought down a cantaloupe with a spoon in it. And I do not like cantaloupes. Yuck.
Oh, I
can't
love
concentrate.
Cantaloupe. Would you like me to move the cantaloupe?
Well, it's not that they have to move it, but I'm just trying to not think about anyone eating it. I'm sure lots of people like cantaloupes.
I love cantaloupe.
Okay, so what do you want to talk about today?
I am wondering why the disclaimer is after flip side. If you did that on purpose or just by accident, or did you have something in mind that this might be a very...
Well, if you actually want me to logically figure out why the disclaimer is
yes,
where
I
it
would.
is.
Yes. Because I know that your brain works very chronological and very logical, and it wasn't accidental.
Well, it probably was subconscious there because
exactly.
It's like,
there you go.
What is Sheila going to say today?
Exactly.
Okay, so probably that was subconsciously, but it's a lot more innocent, I think. I mean, if you actually look at the way the show is broken down, we start with what's on your mind, and then I wanted to get the interview near the start.
Yes, I understand.
Then Cam's is nice because he has his jingle, his theme music before and after.
Right.
So what's nice about that is then I can put in something that's just talking. So that's where we snuck in the, hey, thanks everyone for listening part and communicate with us on social media, which by the way, you guys can do. Well, it seems to be like people are really resisting that.
Yeah, maybe you should switch it and put communicate on social media right after us and see if that helps.
Oh,
and
so maybe like people are thinking of it when they finish the podcast.
Maybe.
But anyway, so there's Cam's got music, and so that one. And then there's a jingle and then something, a jingle and then something. And just
but there's us and there's nothing. It goes straight from flip side into
I had to put it in somewhere. And who likes disclaimers? I mean, it's important to get it in. That's my personality. I have to make sure.
I know.
And it's not, it really is to try and make sure people are safe. Like, hey guys, we try and get things right, but don't act on things unless you talk to people who are qualified. That's important. So maybe that's it. I wanted to leave them with that thought, but also I didn't want it to be up front. I don't know. It was all very innocent. And you're making it sound very jaded.
It's never innocent. I just felt personally that it was because of me that you put a disclaimer in right after our flip side. So.
Okay. Well, I never thought of it in those terms, but having thought about it in those terms, I now think it's in the right spot because I think the disclaimer should go as close to where you're doing the most talking as possible.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way.
And it's sign-off time. It's Sheila here with Sammy and John.
Yo.
Hi, Sammy.
Hey.
So I just want to say that when Sammy and I did the What's on Your Mind today, John wanted to say that he is not that good of a chess player. And so I just have to make sure everyone knows that John is not an amazing chess player. Okay? Happy,
yes,
John?
I can play chess, but I can never figure out more than like a move in advance or two.
Well, he's better than me, that's for sure. So anyways, there's our correction for the day. And we had a busy week this week. We went to the art Feast of the Senses, and that was really good. Like, to me, it might have been the best one. There was more people than they usually have. And so that was really great because it just makes it more lively. And the chef was an artist. Right.
We did an earlier interview of Shirley Medill of the KW Art Gallery, and they do something called Feast for the Senses, where a chef and a sommelier look at paintings and then they get creative and make something to eat and pair it with wine. And it was amazing.
It was amazing. Excellent food, excellent wine, excellent art. It was impressive. And John and I went to Collingwood, got in a little bit of a snowstorm. It was just beautiful. It was a winter wonderland up in Collingwood this weekend. So it felt like Christmas is a-coming. That's kind of exciting. And so that's all that's new with me. What's up with you, Sammy?
Yeah, not too much. My parents were also in Collingwood and they said the same thing, that it was gorgeous up there. Mm-hmm. So we got a little bit of snow, not too much here though.
No, it was cold and windy, but not too much snow.
Yeah, very cold. My face hurt, but we pushed through it. This weekend I went to a fun pottery market up at Rim Park, so in Waterloo.
Yeah.
And cute little pottery items. We got some mugs and some plates, and I got some Christmas presents. So that was a lot of fun. It was like supporting artists. Spent probably a little bit too much money, but it's okay.
Well, that sounds like fun.
Pretend it didn't happen, but they're really cute and I really like them. So yeah, fun. Yeah.
Excellent.
What do you have going on, John?
I absolutely loved the Feast for the Senses. It was one of the best for sure that I'd been to. And also there was a lot of people there, so that was pretty exciting. And then this weekend I did something I really enjoyed. So our firm is a pretty big firm, and this weekend, the 3 Ontario offices, we got together and all the associates who are in litigation did fake trials, did moots. So I and other people would be judges or giving them tips on things like examinations and cross-examinations. And it's so hard in the middle of a busy work life to do that kind of thing, but it's so rewarding. It was great. And it helped me remind me of a whole bunch of good tips as well. And I know, so in this, you may not know this yet, Sammy, because I put the show together without always chatting with you, but the games one was today. Yeah. And one of my favorite games is something called That's Pretty Clever. And that's one that Steven and Elise showed to us. And so it's been on back order for a long time. So it finally came available and I got it, but in order to get free shipping, I had to spend a little more money. So I got the Love Letters game, which you talked about. So hopefully we can figure out how to use that.
Yeah, I think he's going to put in the stocking for me.
Oh, nice.
That'll be in the stocking for the Christmas. Yeah, so
that's a good idea.
Yeah, so you'll have to teach us how to play, Sammy.
Yeah, it's a great game.
Okay.
Yeah, and even though we only went to Collingwood for a really short time, it was so relaxing to get up there. So that was great. So it's been a really good week. And that's it for me.
Yeah.
So unless you guys got something else, I'll just say, hope everyone enjoyed the show and looking forward to next week.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.